Hey, what's up, YouTube? Put you up here, get you set for my recording. My ducks are going crazy. So today I just had some ideas this morning when I woke up and started pulling on the thread as I usually do. And we'll just kick it right off. So I was asked when I thought that America started going down this path. And I was thinking, because I always hear people say, well, in the 2000s or no, in the 80s, and every generation is always blaming a generation before them. And I feel that that's undue, and it to repeat and perpetuate that, it just seems ignorant, to look at the facts and look back in history and say, well, where did things kind of go awry? And so Thomas Jefferson was one of those people that's always kind of quoted. Not that he was a great guy or whoever he was someone that had ideas that still can hold true, and sound advice that hold true today. And one of the things that he was a big advocate for, or against I should say, was a central bank. He believed that a central bank would undermine the nation's democracy. And so he really, hold on, getting a phone call. Now I gotta focus. So he was opposed to a central bank of any kind. He wasn't the only one. Many were. It was the European style of banking at the time. And when you start to look at, first of all, read the book The Creature of Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. If you haven't read it, great read. It really, really puts into perspective the things that people kind of were doing back in the 1900s just to create the Federal Reserve. And the movie that comes to mind, right, is It's a Wonderful Life. That's a Christmas movie, and since it's about Christmas, about that time of year, it always makes me think that Henry Potter, the villain of that movie, was these central bankers that took over. Just impersonal, all about the profits, not about the people. That was a caveat. But anyway, in December of 1913, the Federal Reserve Act was passed in secrecy, in a sense. It was created after the Aldrich Verstollen, I forget his name now, Act, which was in the late 1800s, I want to say 1895. And that ultimately kind of set the stage for the Federal Reserve Act. And the Federal Reserve Act, what it did is it forced all banks to purchase bonds from a central bank, basically monopolizing the financial markets. And it just so happened on December 22nd, 23rd, when most, I think it was like 33 of the senators were out for Christmas break. So when they had to vote on it, a lot of people didn't even read, which is, first of all, that's politicians. Politicians don't read the bills that they sign. But they didn't even read what they were passing. They just wanted to go on vacation. So they went on their vacation and passed the Federal Reserve Act, which personally I think killed the country, or it at least castrated it. And can you say castrate in a negative way, I guess? I don't know. It did. It cut us off at the knees. And in October of 1913, funnily enough, 2 months before, there was the federal income tax passed with the 16th Amendment, which Nelson Aldrich was also a huge advocate for. So you kind of can see how the money's getting consolidated. Nelson Aldrich had a huge hand to play. He wasn't a huge name. It actually wasn't until his name wasn't even on the information, really, that people were okay with it. His daughter married John D. Rockefeller. You may have heard that name before. The son of John Rockefeller, the co-founder of Standard Oil, which is the reason, Standard Oil is the reason we have all of these laws and things, regulation of corporations against monopolies. A monopoly being one single corporation or entity owning a corner of a market. Standard Oil in particular, owned all of the oil producing and gas producing industries, so they could set the price wherever they wanted. So the loophole around that is you create a couple other shell companies that aren't tied to you, and now you and your 3 other companies can pretty much control the market based on supply and demand. Oh, your price too high here? That's all right. You can come over here and buy it from these people. And either way, the money goes to me. Anyway, that's pretty That's definitely conjecture, but there's issues there. In October of 1913, with the passage of the 16th Amendment, which was initially only supposed to be for people that their income was more than $3,000 a year, which was 3%, about 3% of the population of the time in 1913. That, adjusted for inflation in 2023, would mean that if you made $93,000 a year, you would have to pay a 1% tax. Now, let's not even get into the history of all the other taxes. That's on your income. So that's the federal income tax. So it really opened up the eyes. I've got my notes down here I keep looking at. But it really opened up a lot of people's eyes. A lot of people were opposed to that. I think it passed by 3 votes. That now has exploded, and now everybody has been pulled into that. Nelson Aldrich's became the advisor to Gerald Ford, who became the president. So Nelson Aldrich was the vice president to Gerald Ford, who was the president after Richard Nixon. If we remember from the last video, 1971, Richard Nixon pulled us off the gold standard, which Nelson Aldrich kind of fostered in to the gold standard. So we came full circle, right? Nelson Aldrich, I believe that was his son or son-in-law, I forget. But you can see how these names keep popping up, and it's this same name, same person, same name, same family name, same lineage, and how they're consolidating that wealth through the histories. So to get back to the beginning, I really think that in 1913 that was the beginning of the decline for the American people. And what started me on this was looking into I was listening to some music earlier, and System of a Down. I like System of a Down a lot. Their song Prison, and it's talking about they're trying to build a prison and how the population of the prison system had multiplied since, I think, 1985. I looked into a lot of numbers there and found that there was only in the 1960s, let me see here. Yeah, 1970, the prison population was 360,000 nationally in the whole nation. 360,000 people in prison. That's nothing. Because by 2023, we have 2 million people currently incarcerated in prison. And it was after the passage of the Controlled Substance Act that those numbers expanded exponentially. The number I think right now that they're agreeing on is somewhere around 32% of those incarcerations are due to the possession or manufacture of controlled substance, meaning they made drugs illegal, and that caused a huge population. I mean, 2 million people right now. If the population of America, I think, is 33 billion, give or take. I could be wrong. Correct me if you know. 2 million people. That's a pretty large percentage, and everyone wants to blame them. But when we look at the history of it, in the 1960s there weren't that many people in prison. So I don't personally believe that we just had this number come up out of nowhere. But when you can see how, I always say it, broken families create broken families, and that's not always true. But from a psychology standpoint, broken families tend to create broken families, because if you don't really have a good idea of what a life should look like, or what parenting looks like, or what leadership looks like from that perspective, it's hard for you to create and foster that. Not impossible. I served in the military with a lot of people that learned leadership values and skills, and they look back and went, wow, I didn't realize how much I had lost by not having, strong male role model or whatever. But we'll get to that for another video. In the meantime, thank you for staying and listening to my rant. When do you think that America started to decline? And do you agree with my assessment? Do you think that it was the creation of the Federal Reserve Act and Nelson Aldrich and his whole clan at Jekyll Island secretly planning this on their hunting trip? Check out G. Edward Griffin's book, Creature of Jekyll Island, and let me know what you guys think. Thank you very much.